What happens when Hollywood royalty meets political commentary and the crown doesn't get the deference it expects? In just 37 seconds, one comment would unravel an entire interview and expose a side of a guest that millions never saw coming. The studio lights were hot that evening. Bill Maher sat across from Meghan Markle, a guest he'd invited to discuss her various initiatives and perspectives on modern media. The audience was packed, eager to hear from someone who had dominated headlines for years. But what started as a standard celebrity interview quickly transformed into something nobody in that room could have predicted. So Meghan, let's talk about your relationship with the press, Bill began, leaning back in his chair with that familiar smirk. You've been pretty vocal about how unfairly you've been treated. But some people might say that when you court the media on your terms, you can't really complain when they cover you on theirs. The audience murmured. It was a fair question, the kind Bill was known for asking. Direct, challenging, but not disrespectful. Meghan's expression shifted. Well, Bill, I think what you're failing to understand is the difference between coverage and harassment. When you've lived through what I've lived through, you'd know that there are lines that shouldn't be crossed. Sure, absolutely, Bill nodded. But you've also done paid interviews, documentaries, podcasts. You've written about your experiences extensively. At what point does it become less about privacy and more about controlling the narrative? The temperature in the room changed. You could feel it. Controlling the narrative, Meghan repeated, her voice taking on an edge. That's rich coming from someone who makes a living telling other people what to think. The audience gasped. Bill's eyebrows shot up, but he maintained his composure. This was his show, his territory, and he'd handled hostile guests before. Well, that's literally what talk shows are, he said with a laugh, trying to lighten the mood. I share opinions. People are free to agree or disagree. That's kind of the whole point of free speech. Free speech, Meghan said, and the way she said it made it sound like an accusation. Is that what you call it when you spend years making jokes at other people's expense? When you punch down at people who can't fight back? Bill leaned forward now, his smile fading. Hold on. Punch down? I go after powerful people. Politicians, corporations, institutions. That's punching up, not down. You went after me, Meghan shot back. You're a duchess who married into one of the wealthiest families on the planet, Bill replied, his voice steady but firm. I think you can handle a joke or two. The audience was dead silent now. This wasn't playful banter anymore. This was a genuine confrontation unfolding in real time. Meghan sat up straighter, her jaw set. You know what your problem is, Bill. You're a relic. You're from a generation that thinks saying whatever you want without consequences is some kind of badge of honor. But the world has moved on. People are more conscious now, more aware of the damage that careless words can cause. Careless words? Bill's voice rose slightly. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've interviewed presidents, activists, scientists, artists. I've had my show canceled and brought back. I've said things that made people uncomfortable, because that's the job. Making people think. Making people question their assumptions. That's not careless. That's deliberate. It's reckless, Meghan interrupted. And it's exactly the kind of platforming that allows dangerous ideas to spread. Bill stared at her for a moment, and you could see him making a choice. He could let this go, redirect the conversation, move to a commercial break. But that wasn't who he was. Dangerous ideas, he said slowly. Like what? That maybe people who live in palaces shouldn't lecture working-class folks about their privilege? That maybe someone who's worth millions shouldn't complain quite so much about how hard their life is? The audience reacted with scattered applause, but Meghan wasn't backing down. You don't know anything about my life, she said, her voice cold. You sit here in your studio with your audience who laughs at everything you say, and you think that makes you some kind of truth teller. But really, you're just another old man who's terrified of becoming irrelevant. The applause stopped. The audience wasn't sure how to react anymore. This had gone beyond a spirited debate. This was personal now. Bill took a breath. Okay, let's take a step back here. You came on this show knowing what kind of show it is. You knew I was going to ask tough questions. If you can't handle pushback without insulting me, then maybe you're not as committed to honest dialogue as you claim to be. Honest dialogue? Meghan laughed, but there was no humor in it. You don't want dialogue, Bill. You want submission. You want guests who'll sit here and let you perform your little routine while they nod and smile. Well, I'm not that person. Clearly, Bill said dryly. You know what? I don't have to sit here and take this, Meghan said, her voice rising. I don't have to subject myself to your condescension and your outdated worldview and your desperate attempts to stay edgy. Bill spread his hands. Then don't. Nobody's forcing you to be here. That was the moment. That single sentence. The invitation she'd been waiting for, or maybe the excuse she needed. Meghan stood up abruptly, pulling off her microphone. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is the problem with people like you. You think because you have a platform, you can treat people however you want. You think your jokes and your sarcasm give you permission to be cruel. I haven't been cruel, Bill said, standing now too. His voice was firm, but not angry. I've been direct. There's a difference. And if you can't see that, if you can't separate honest criticism from cruelty, then yeah, maybe this isn't the right show for you. Oh, I know this isn't the right show for me, Meghan said, her voice dripping with disdain. Because I actually have standards. I actually care about how my words affect people. I don't hide behind comedy to say horrible things and then act surprised when people call me out. The audience was completely silent now, watching this unfold like a car crash they couldn't look away from. What horrible things? Bill asked, his patience clearly wearing thin. What have I said tonight that was horrible? I asked you about your media strategy. I questioned some of your positions. That's not horrible. That's a conversation. Or at least it's supposed to be. It's an ambush, Meghan snapped. You invited me here under false pretenses. You told my team this would be a respectful discussion about my work. Instead, you've done nothing but attack me from the moment I sat down. Bill shook his head. That's not true, and you know it. I started with a straightforward question about the press. You're the one who escalated this. You're the one who started throwing insults. Because you deserved it, Meghan said, and there it was. The mask completely off now. You deserve to be called out for the things you say. You deserve to be held accountable. And if that makes you uncomfortable, if that threatens your little empire here, then good. Maybe it's time someone finally told you the truth. Bill crossed his arms. And what truth is that? That you're not as smart as you think you are. That your show isn't as important as you think it is. That the world is changing, and you're being left behind. And instead of adapting, you're just getting angrier and more bitter. The audience gasped again. Several people looked uncomfortable. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was something else entirely. Bill was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured, almost calm. You know what, Meghan? You're right about one thing. The world is changing, but not in the way you think. See, what's happening now is that people are getting tired of being told what they can and can't say. They're tired of being lectured by celebrities who live completely different lives, but act like they understand everyone's struggles. They're tired of victim mentality being worn like a badge of honor. Victim mentality? Meghan's voice went up an octave. How dare you? How dare you minimize what I've been through? I'm not minimizing anything, Bill said. I'm saying that you came on this show, you got asked some basic questions, and instead of engaging in good faith, you've spent the last 10 minutes insulting me and my audience, and now you're acting like you're the one being attacked. That's what I mean. Meghan grabbed her purse from beside the chair. I don't have to listen to this. I don't have to sit here and be disrespected by someone who clearly has no understanding of what it means to live under constant scrutiny. You're on a talk show, Bill said, his voice rising now. Constant scrutiny is literally the point. You answer questions. You defend your positions. You engage with criticism. That's how this works. That's how all of this works. If you can't handle that, then maybe stay out of the public eye. Maybe you should learn how to treat your guests with basic human decency, Meghan shot back. I have been decent, Bill said, his voice loud now, filling the studio. I have been more than decent. What I haven't been is deferential. And that's what you really can't stand, isn't it? That I'm not bowing down, that I'm not treating you like you're special. I never asked you to treat me like I'm special, Meghan said. Yes, you did, Bill countered. The second you walked out here, you expected kid gloves. You expected softball questions and praise and validation. And when you didn't get it, when you got treated like every other guest who comes on this show, you couldn't handle it. Meghan's face was flushed now, her composure completely gone. You have no idea what you're talking about. You have no idea who I am or what I've been through or what I've sacrificed. Then tell me, Bill said, gesturing to the chair. Sit down and tell me. Have an actual conversation instead of just getting defensive and hostile. I don't owe you anything, Meghan said. I don't owe you my story or my pain or my justification for existing. I came here as a courtesy, and this is how you repay it? Bill laughed, but it was a harsh sound. A courtesy? You came here to promote yourself, just like everyone else. Let's not pretend this was some favor you were doing me. I'm done, Meghan announced, turning toward the edge of the stage. I'm done with this interview. I'm done with this show. And I'm done with you. Bill called after her. You know what your problem is? You want everyone to care about your feelings. But you don't care about anyone else's. You want empathy without having to give it. You want understanding without having to listen. That's not how the world works. That's not how people work. Meghan spun around, pointing at him. No, you know what your problem is? You're a bully. You've always been a bully. You hide it behind jokes and political commentary, but at the end of the day, you're just someone who likes making other people feel small so you can feel big. That's rich, Bill said, coming from someone who just spent 15 minutes trying to make me feel small. You made yourself small, Meghan said. I just pointed it out. Get out, Bill said suddenly, and the sharpness of it cut through everything else. Get off my stage. If you're going to stand there and insult me, insult my show, insult my audience, then get out. We're done here. Meghan's eyes widened. Excuse me? You heard me, Bill said. You want to leave? Leave. You don't get to stand on my stage and tell me how terrible I am and expect me to just take it. This is my show, my stage, and I'm asking you to go. For a moment, Meghan just stood there, clearly not expecting this. She'd expected him to back down, to apologize, to try to smooth things over. But Bill Maher wasn't known for backing down. Fine, Meghan said finally, her voice shaking with anger. This is exactly the kind of behavior I expected from you. Exactly the kind of small-minded, controlling, patriarchal response that doesn't surprise me one bit. Patriarchal? Bill repeated. I'd kick any guest off who acted like this, male or female. This has nothing to do with gender and everything to do with respect. Something you clearly don't have for anyone but yourself. You don't deserve respect, Meghan said, and those words hung in the air like a bomb. The audience stirred uncomfortably. Some people looked shocked. Others looked angry. This had crossed every line. Bill just nodded slowly. Okay, we're done. Security, can you please escort Ms. Markle out of the building? You're having me removed? Meghan's voice was incredulous. You're actually having me removed? You said you were leaving, Bill pointed out. I'm just making sure it happens. Because at this point, I don't trust you not to keep standing there hurling insults. Two security guards appeared at the edge of the stage, looking uncomfortable but professional. They didn't touch Meghan, just stood there, waiting. "This is unbelievable," Meghan said, looking around at the audience as if seeking support. "You're all seeing this, right? You're all watching him abuse his power like this?" Nobody said anything. The audience just watched, transfixed. "I'm not abusing anything," Bill said quietly. "You came on my show. You disrespected me, my staff, and my audience. And now you're facing the consequences of that behavior. It's really that simple." "Nothing is ever simple with people like you," Meghan said, but she was moving toward the exit now, the security guards flanking her at a respectful distance. "People like you always have to have the last word. Always have to be right. Always have to win." "This isn't about winning," Bill called after her. "This is about basic civility. Something you might want to look into." Meghan turned one last time at the edge of the stage. "History won't be kind to you, Bill. People will remember this. They'll remember how you treated me." "They'll remember how you behaved," Bill corrected. "Big difference." And with that, Meghan Markle walked off the stage, the security guards following behind her. The studio doors closed with a heavy thud that echoed through the silent space. Bill stood there for a moment, looking out at his audience. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Finally, Bill walked back to his desk and sat down. He took a sip of water, cleared his throat, and looked directly into the camera. "Well," he said, and despite everything, there was a hint of his usual humor in his voice. "That went well." The audience laughed, and it was like a pressure valve releasing. The tension broke, and people started clapping, some standing, others just looking relieved that it was over. "You know, folks," Bill continued, settling back into his chair, "when we book guests for this show, we do our homework. We prepare questions. We try to create an environment where people can share their views and engage in real conversation. But every once in a while, you get someone who just can't handle not being agreed with. Someone who mistakes directness for hostility and questions for attacks." He paused, taking another sip of water. "I've been called a lot of things over the years. Controversial, provocative, sometimes even obnoxious. And you know what? Some of that's fair. I'm not perfect. I don't always get it right. But one thing I've always tried to do is have honest conversations with my guests, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable, because that's where the interesting stuff happens. That's where you actually learn something." The audience was listening intently now, hanging on every word. But you can't have an honest conversation with someone who sees every question as an attack. You can't have a dialogue with someone who thinks disagreement equals disrespect. And you definitely can't have a productive discussion with someone who responds to basic interview questions by calling you a bully and questioning your relevance. More applause. Bill held up a hand. "Look, I get it. Being in the public eye is hard. Having your every move scrutinized is exhausting. I'm not saying it isn't. But here's the thing. If you're going to put yourself out there, if you're going to do interviews and documentaries and podcasts, if you're going to write books and give speeches and position yourself as a public figure, then you have to be willing to engage with people who might not see things your way. You have to be willing to defend your positions, and you have to be able to do it without falling apart the second someone pushes back." He leaned forward, his expression serious now. "What you just saw wasn't me being mean. It wasn't me being unfair. It was me doing my job, asking questions, challenging assumptions, trying to get past the talking points to something real. And what you saw from her was someone who couldn't handle that. Someone who expected to be treated like royalty, literally and figuratively, and threw a tantrum when she wasn't." The audience erupted in applause. Bill waited for it to die down before continuing. I've had guests on this show who disagree with me on everything: politics, religion, social issues, you name it. And we've had great conversations because they were willing to engage. They were willing to defend their views without attacking me personally. They understood that being challenged isn't the same as being disrespected. He shook his head slowly. But what happened tonight was something different. That wasn't a guest who disagreed with me. That was someone who felt entitled to come on this show and be praised without question. And when that didn't happen, when I had the audacity to treat her like any other guest, she couldn't handle it. She made it personal. She made it hostile. And then she acted like she was the victim. Bill spread his hands. I've been doing this a long time. I've seen a lot of walk-offs. I've seen guests storm out, hang up, refuse to answer questions. It comes with the territory. But I've never, in all my years, had someone come on this show and be so openly contemptuous, not just of me, but of this entire process. Of the idea that they should have to explain themselves, or justify their positions, or engage with criticism. The audience was completely silent again, absorbing his words. And you know what the saddest part is? Bill continued. We could have had a great conversation. I genuinely wanted to hear her perspective. I wanted to understand her point of view. But she wasn't interested in sharing it. She was interested in being validated. And when validation wasn't immediately forthcoming, she decided to burn the whole thing down. He picked up his notes, glanced at them, then set them down again. There's a lesson in this, I think, about how we communicate with each other, about how we handle disagreement, about the difference between being challenged and being attacked, because those are not the same thing. And if we can't tell the difference anymore, if we've reached a point where any question, any pushback, any moment of discomfort is seen as abuse or harassment or bullying, then we're in serious trouble as a society. More applause, louder this time. I don't regret a single question I asked tonight, Bill said firmly. They were fair questions, important questions, questions that a lot of people have been wondering about. And the fact that she couldn't answer them without losing her composure and attacking me personally says a lot more about her than it does about me. He took a breath, seeming to consider his next words carefully. Look, I wish her well. I really do. I hope she finds peace and happiness and whatever it is she's looking for. But I also hope that at some point she takes a hard look at how she handled herself tonight. Because that wasn't the behavior of someone who's confident in their positions. That was the behavior of someone who's used to people being afraid to challenge them. And I'm not afraid. I've never been afraid. That's not going to change. The audience gave him a standing ovation. Bill stood up, acknowledging it with a nod. We've got a great show for you tonight, despite all the drama. My next guest is someone who actually knows how to have a conversation without throwing a fit. The audience laughed and clapped as Bill shuffled his papers, looking both relieved and energized by what had just happened. You know, he said, leaning back in his chair, when someone walks off like that, when they have a complete meltdown on live television, there's always going to be people who wonder if maybe I went too far. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe I should have been gentler. He paused, looking directly into the camera. And to those people, I say this. What you just saw wasn't me being cruel. It was me refusing to participate in a performance. She wanted to come out here, share her rehearsed talking points, get some sympathetic nods, and then leave feeling validated. And when I didn't play along, when I actually treated her like an adult who should be able to defend her positions, she couldn't handle it. The audience murmured in agreement. That reaction, that explosion of anger and insults, that wasn't because I was mean to her. That was because she's not used to being challenged. She's surrounded herself with people who tell her she's right about everything, who affirm every feeling she has, who never push back. And the second she encountered someone who wouldn't do that, her whole facade crumbled. Bill stood up, walking to the front of his desk. She accused me of punching down, of being a bully. But let's think about what actually happened here. I'm a talk show host. I ask questions. That's my job. She's a duchess, a millionaire, someone with access to resources and platforms that 99% of the world will never have. And she came on my show, got asked some basic questions, and responded by trying to destroy my credibility. He let that sink in. Who was punching down? Who was the bully? Because from where I'm sitting, it wasn't me. More applause filled the studio. I've had presidents on this show, prime ministers, CEOs of billion-dollar companies, military generals, people with real power, real influence. And you know what? They can handle being questioned. They can sit in that chair and defend their decisions without having a meltdown. But somehow, she couldn't. Bill walked back to his desk. You want to know the ironic part? Before she came out here, her people sent us a list of topics we weren't allowed to discuss. Can you believe that? A list of forbidden subjects. We politely declined. Because that's not how this show works. We don't do puff pieces. We do real conversations. Or at least we try to. The audience laughed. The questions I wasn't supposed to ask were about her relationship with the media, about her public statements that seemed contradictory. In other words, exactly the kind of questions any journalist should be asking, but she wanted them off limits. She wanted to control the entire narrative. And when she couldn't, that's when things went south. Bill looked into the camera again. There's a whole category of public figures now who want all the benefits of being famous, but none of the accountability. They want to shape public opinion, to lecture people. But the second anyone asks them to explain themselves, they cry victim. They claim they're being attacked. Well, that's not what I do. That's never been what I do. The audience gave another standing ovation. So, yeah, I asked her some tough questions. And yeah, she didn't like it. And yeah, she stormed off calling me names. And you know what? Good. I'm glad I asked those questions. I'm glad I didn't back down. Because if we can't ask public figures hard questions, if we can't challenge people who put themselves in the spotlight, then what's the point of any of this? He sat back down. What happened tonight was someone expecting an echo chamber, expecting me to nod along and validate everything she said. And when I didn't, she couldn't function. She attacked, she fled. And that says everything you need to know. Bill picked up his notes. I will never apologize for asking hard questions. I will never apologize for treating my guests like intelligent adults who should be able to explain their positions. And if that means some people walk off my show, so be it. I'd rather have that than compromise what this show is supposed to be. The applause was thunderous. Bill acknowledged it with a small smile before looking down at his desk, ready to move forward with the rest of his program.